Take it. You need it more than I do, she said, trembling but certain, as she draped her sweater over his shoulders. Only minutes earlier, Elise Thompson had stood inside a narrow thrift shop on Flatbush Avenue. She held a wool sweater in both hands, gray once, now faded, the elbow lightly torn and poorly mended. It wasn't pretty, but it was heavy, warm. Elise ran her fingers along the seam like someone touching a lifeline. That's $8, the shop owner said without looking up. Elise swallowed. She opened her wallet. Inside were 3 crumpled bills and a handful of coins, everything she had left after paying bus fare for the week. She cleared her throat. Sir, I only have 5. It's snowing hard tonight. Could you take that? The man looked up then. His eyes swept over her. Black woman, late 30s. Work shoes scuffed. Uniform sleeves worn thin. His mouth twisted. 5? He scoffed. You think I run a charity? I'm not asking for charity, Elise said quickly. I worked all day. I just need something warm to get home. He laughed, sharp and ugly. Always the same story. You people come in here crying like the cold is my fault. He snatched the sweater from her hands. Get out if you can't pay. Elise's chest tightened. Please, she said, her voice breaking despite herself. It's freezing. I'll pay the rest next week. I promise. To be due. The man stepped forward and shoved her. Hard. Elise stumbled back, hit the coat rack, and fell to the floor. The breath rushed out of her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't move. The bell over the door rattled again as the wind screamed outside. Get out, the owner shouted. Before I call the cops. Elise pushed herself up on shaking hands. Her knees buckled and she sank back down, right there on the cold tile floor. Please, she sobbed, the word tearing out of her. I'm cold. I don't have anything else. For a long second, the man stared at her, disgust plain on his face. Then he turned away, grabbed the sweater, and flung it at her like trash. Take it. $5. And don't come back. Elise caught it against her chest. She didn't thank him. She couldn't. Her hands shook too badly. She pressed the bills onto the counter, stood, and walked out into the snow without looking back. Now, standing at the bus stop, that same sweater was wrapped around her shoulders, frayed, heavy, warm enough to keep her upright. That was when she saw him. Across the street, beneath the narrow awning of a closed bodega, a man stood hunched and unmoving, his shoulders visibly trembling. No coat, no scarf. Snow clung to his hair and soaked through his dress shirt. At first, Elise looked away. New York taught you early how to survive. Mind your business. Keep moving. Don't bleed for strangers. But something held her there. Maybe it was the way his hands were clenched, useless against the cold, or the fact that no one else had stopped, or maybe it was simply that she had been on her knees minutes earlier, begging not to freeze. She crossed the street. The man startled when she approached, eyes lifting slowly as if the effort cost him something. His face was pale, lips tinged blue. I missed my driver, he muttered, more to himself than to her. And my phone. I dropped it. Somewhere. Iz nodded. Are you all right? Elise asked softly. He nodded once, though it didn't look convincing. She hesitated. Then, without allowing herself time to think, she reached up and pulled the sweater from her own shoulders. The cold hit her instantly, sharp and unforgiving. Take it, she said. You need it more than I do. I can't, he protested weakly. You can, she replied, already draping it over him. It's just a sweater, there fanned. When the wool settled against his back, he closed his eyes for a moment. A breath left him, slow and unguarded. Thank you, he whispered. They stood there together, snow falling around them. Elise crossed her arms tight against her body. She was shaking now, but she kept her jaw set. You're freezing, he said. She gave a small, tired smile. I've been colder. As the wind shifted, he slid his hands into the sweater pockets. Something crinkled. He paused, then carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a child's drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. A red heart floating between them. My mommy is my hero, it read. He looked up at her, This is yours. Elise's eyes softened. My daughter's, she said quietly. She drew it before she passed. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time his voice sounded steady. The bus lights appeared down the street. Elise turned toward them. Stay warm, she said simply. What's your name? He asked. Elise. I'm Nathaniel. She nodded and stepped onto the bus, choosing a seat near the back. Through the fogged glass, she watched him fade into the snow, wrapped in the only warmth she had fought for that night. Nathaniel stood there long after the bus disappeared, the sweater heavy on his shoulders, the drawing pressed close to his chest. He did not tell her who he was. He did not tell her that the world bent for him, that money and power waited just beyond the storm. All he knew was this: a woman who had been humiliated, shoved to the floor, and left with almost nothing had still chosen to give. And as he turned and walked into the night, something long buried inside him stirred, quiet, insistent, and impossible to ignore. If this story touched you, please like and let us know where you're watching from. You never know. Someone nearby might be watching with you right now. Nathaniel Carrington stood alone in the snow, the weight of the sweater pressing against his chest like an unfamiliar truth. The streets of Brooklyn had emptied as the storm deepened, flakes thickening into a curtain of white that erased corners, softened edges, and muffled sound. But inside him, something sharp remained awake. He didn't move for several minutes. The warmth from the sweater, a garment too small, too worn, seeped slowly into his body, but not fast enough to thaw the shock that held him in place. The child's drawing was still in his hand, the crayon strokes now faintly smeared from where his gloveless fingers had pressed too tightly. My mommy is my hero. He whispered the words aloud, as if testing their shape. The phrase felt too large for a slip of paper so small. He folded it carefully, slid it back into the pocket where it had been tucked so closely to her. He wondered how many times Elise had held it, looked at it, talked to it. He turned and began walking. There was no plan, no destination. His driver wouldn't be back until morning. His penthouse, with its sterile walls and panoramic views of a city that had long stopped impressing him, felt too far, too cold. Instead, his feet carried him down Winthrop Street, past darkened stoops and shuttered storefronts, his breath fogging in the air, sweater clinging damply to his skin. A few blocks down, he spotted a cab idling near a corner store. He raised a hand. The driver, a weary-eyed man in a knitted cap, gave him a once-over, hesitating, before unlocking the door. Nathaniel slid in. Where to? Midtown, 75th, and Lexington. The cab pulled away, tires crunching over ice. Nathaniel leaned back, fingers still brushing the sweater's fabric. The cab's heater sputtered to life, blasting stale warmth. For the first time in hours, his bones didn't ache. As they crossed the Williamsburg Bridge, the skyline rose ahead, angular, bright, untouchable. His name sat atop one of those buildings. Carrington Tesh, 38 stories of glass and steel. The company he had built from the ground up, from one patent and a garage, now worth over $15 billion. And yet, here he was, wearing a second-hand sweater, its sleeves too short, its elbow torn, given to him by a woman who had been on her knees begging for warmth just an hour ago. He thought about that shopkeeper. He hadn't seen it, hadn't needed to, but he could imagine the scene. He knew the type. He'd dealt with them growing up, before the world knew his name. People who believed dignity had a price tag. He clenched his fists. The cab pulled up in front of his building. Doorman stood ready but didn't recognize him at first. No overcoat, no polished shoes, just a man in worn clothes and a sweater that didn't belong. Inside the penthouse, silence greeted him. He crossed the open floor plan slowly past the marble kitchen, untouched in weeks, past the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the East River like a painting. He went straight to the fireplace and lit it, more for habit than comfort. He took off the sweater, folded it, and held it to his chest. Upstairs, in his study, he pulled open a drawer in his desk and took out a cigar box. Inside were the rare things he'd kept, things that weren't numbers, not assets. A concert ticket from his mother's favorite jazz club, a photo of his sister on her wedding day, a keychain from the first car he bought with cash. He added the drawing. Then he stopped, He took out the drawing again and stared at it. He saw the uneven crayon strokes, the crooked sun, the childlike earnestness in every line. The words weren't just love. They were survival. They were memory. That woman, Elise, she wasn't just kind. She was holding on, and she had still chosen to give. He sat at his desk for a long time, not moving. At some point, his assistant Miles texted, "Are you okay, sir? You disappeared from the event. No one's heard from you." Nathaniel didn't answer. Instead, he typed a message to himself and saved it in his notes. Find Elise Thompson. The next morning, Nathaniel arrived at the Carrington Tech Tower just after 6 a.m. Hours before most of the building stirred. He wore the sweater under his coat, the collar peeking out as a reminder against the brushed cashmere and silk linings he was used to. Miles met him on the executive floor with 2 coffees. "Long night?" he asked. Nathaniel nodded. "I need something." "Of course. I need to find someone." Miles raised an eyebrow. "A potential hire?" "No, a maid. Her name is Elise Thompson. She works or used to at a house in Long Island. She gave me this." Miles blinked. "You want us to find a maid?" "I want you to find this maid. Any particular reason?" "She saved me from freezing to death last night." Miles tilted his head. "Isn't that what security's for?" Nathaniel shook his head. "No, not like that." He turned and walked into his office. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in golden morning light. On the desk, he laid the drawing out flat and looked at it for a long time. It wasn't business. It wasn't charity. It was something else. A woman had given him warmth when he had nothing to offer, and now he wanted to know who she was. Not out of pity, but because something in her had called something back in him. He just didn't know what. Yet, the sun filtered through frost-covered glass, casting soft gold across the penthouse's minimalist interior. But inside Nathaniel Carrington's chest, there was no such warmth. He hadn't slept. Not really. He'd lain awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling above his California king bed, the drawing sitting on the nightstand like a small, unblinking witness. By 5 a.m., he'd gotten up, brewed black coffee, and stood barefoot on the heated marble floors, watching the skyline brighten over the East River. The sweater still hung over the back of his armchair. He didn't want to touch it again just yet. It felt too sacred, too real. Elise Thompson. He'd only spoken her name aloud once, in the back of that cab, and still, it clung to him like the scent of winter air, sharp, undeniable. She hadn't just given him warmth, she'd handed him a truth he hadn't realized he was starving for. That human connection could still exist without expectation, without contracts, without press releases. It shook him. In his world, nothing was ever free. Nathaniel took another sip of coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. His phone buzzed on the counter. Miles again. 7:03 a.m. I ran preliminary checks. Elise Thompson worked for the Braxton estate in Roslyn. Let go last week. No current employer. No permanent address on file. I'll keep digging. Nathaniel replied simply, "Thank you." He set the phone down and walked to the fireplace. The city behind him began to stir horns in the distance. The low hum of delivery trucks, but his thoughts remained tethered to that drawing, that sweater, and to the memory of Elise's eyes, tired, proud, unflinching. He saw a woman who had been bruised by the world, yet still found a way to rise, and last night, she had knelt, not to beg for herself, but because she had nothing left to give, and still offered him the only warmth she had. He clenched his jaw. People like her shouldn't disappear into the cracks. By the time he arrived at Carrington Tech's Midtown headquarters, the executive floor was already buzzing. His assistant, Miles' sharp suit, wire-rimmed glasses, met him at the elevator. "I've got more," Miles said without preamble, keeping pace with Nathaniel's long strides. Elise is originally from Bed-Stuy, graduated from City College with a degree in nursing, worked at a hospital for 6 years before. He glanced at his tablet. A malpractice case involving her daughter. It's sealed, but I found a news brief. Her daughter passed away 2 weeks after the incident. Elise resigned. Nathaniel stopped walking. How old was the girl? 7. He closed his eyes briefly. And then she became a maid? She worked at a diner for a bit, then cleaned offices. Eventually ended up at Braxton's. And now? Miles hesitated. Currently staying at a community shelter in Flatbush, South Brooklyn, Mission. Registered under her full name. She's been there 5 nights. Do they know who I am? No, sir. I didn't use your name. Nathaniel exhaled through his nose. Good. Don't. Miles studied him for a beat. What exactly are we doing here? Nathaniel looked out the hallway's glass wall. Far below, people streamed across crosswalks like blood through veins. Purposeful. Busy. Alone. She gave me a coat when I had nothing on me. Not even my name, he said quietly. I want to know who she is. Not from a file. I want to see her. Really see her. You want to visit the shelter? I want to speak to her. Understood. Later that morning, Nathaniel stepped out of a sleek black car onto a cracked sidewalk in Flatbush. He wore jeans and a plain wool coat, nothing designer, nothing expensive. He didn't want to bring his world into hers like a bulldozer. The South Brooklyn Mission was housed in a red brick building with peeling paint and iron gates. A fading mural of clasped hands covered the side wall. The words, "Grace is given freely," half hidden beneath graffiti. Inside, the warmth was stale and tired. The lobby smelled of bleach and instant coffee. A tired volunteer manned the front desk, flipping through intake forms. Nathaniel stepped forward. I'm looking for someone. Elise Thompson. Is she here? The man looked up slowly. Who's asking? A friend. The volunteer stared for a long second. Then, with a shrug, gestured down the hall. Dining room. Breakfast ended an hour ago, but folks linger. Nathaniel walked slowly, every instinct in him screaming that this wasn't how he moved through the world. He wasn't used to silence or plain walls. He was used to keycards and polished floors, but none of that mattered now. In the dining room, a dozen or so people sat scattered among metal chairs and folding tables. A woman stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at the street. Elise, the same ponytail, the same posture, upright, guarded. He approached gently. Elise. She turned. Recognition flickered. Her lips parted, surprise blooming into disbelief. You? He nodded once. She looked him over, confused. What are you doing here? I came to find you, he said simply. Why? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and held up the drawing. She stared at it. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. You kept it. I couldn't forget it, he said. Or you. Silence stretched between them. Then she crossed her arms tighter. I'm not looking for charity, Mr. Carrington, he said quietly. Her eyes widened, not from recognition of his name, but from the tone he used. There was no pride in it, just a man offering truth. She narrowed her eyes. Wait. Carrington? As in? He nodded. Elise stepped back, suddenly wary. Why would someone like you come find someone like me? He looked at her. Steady. Because last night, when the world had nothing for me, you gave something. Not because you knew who I was, but because you're the kind of person who gives anyway. Oh, I didn't do it for recognition, she said, defensive now. I did it because you were cold. I know, he replied. That's exactly why it mattered. She swallowed. Nathaniel took a careful breath. I'd like to talk to you. Just talk. No cameras. No obligations. Just you and me. After a long pause, Elise nodded once. Fine, she said. But I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises, Nathaniel said. Just honesty. Veer with C. The corner cafe was small. The kind of place that hadn't updated its wallpaper since the 90 seconds. The linoleum tiles were cracked, and the plastic menus had curling edges, but it smelled like strong coffee, buttered toast, and something Nathaniel hadn't felt in a long time, normal. Elise sat across from him in a booth near the window, her hands wrapped tightly around a chipped ceramic mug. She hadn't touched her coffee, just stared into the dark surface like it might show her something she hadn't figured out yet. Nathaniel, for once, didn't know what to say. She'd agreed to come because she was curious, not trusting, not convinced. Just curious. That was clear in the way she sat. one shoulder slightly turned toward the exit, her back straight, eyes cautious. He respected that, admired it, even. "Do you come here often?" he asked, just to break the silence. She glanced around. "Sometimes. They don't judge you for ordering the cheapest thing." A small, humorless smile tugged at his lips. "That's rare. Not here," she said. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with bleached hair and a faded name tag that read, "Linda poured more coffee without asking." Elise nodded politely. Nathaniel murmured a, "Thank you." When they were alone again, he leaned forward, his voice low. "I meant it. Last night, you didn't just help me. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Was this?" Elise looked up from her cup. "What? That people still freeze in winter? That people still care," he said. "And don't expect anything back." She studied him. "You say that like you've never seen it before." "I used to," he admitted. "But somewhere along the way, I started believing kindness was just branding, a PR tool. And now? Now I'm not sure what I believe." They fell quiet again. Outside the window, the snow had begun to melt, turning the sidewalks to slush. A teenager in a hoodie jumped over a puddle and laughed. The sound muffled through the glass. "Why me?" Elise asked finally. "You could have just left. You didn't owe me anything." Nathaniel's answer came without hesitation. "Because I needed to see where that kind of kindness comes from. I needed to understand it again." She shifted in her seat. "You're not the first rich man to show up in my life with good intentions." He nodded slowly. "And I won't pretend to be different. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've stepped over people, ignored things. But what you did, it stuck with me." Elise looked down, her fingers tightened around the mug. "I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because you looked like you were about to fall apart." He smiled faintly. "I was." "Then we're even," she said, finally sipping her coffee. It was probably cold by now, but she didn't flinch. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and laid the folded drawing on the table between them. "I'd like to return this," he said. Elise stared at it for a long moment before reaching out and running a finger across the paper's edge. "You kept it clean," she murmured. "I kept it close," he replied. Her eyes flicked to his, softer now, still guarded, but no longer closed. "You really don't have to do anything," she said. "I'm not looking for a rescue." "I know," he said. "Then why?" "Because I don't think it's right that people like you get forgotten." The words settled between them, heavy but true. Elise's voice dropped. "You don't know me." "I'd like to," Nathaniel said simply. Another long pause. Then, carefully, Elise folded the drawing and tucked it into her coat pocket. She exhaled, then met his eyes. "So what now?" "I'd like to offer you something," he said. "Not a job. Not charity. A role." She tilted her head, skeptical. "A role? At my company. Not as a cleaner. Not as staff. Something else. We're trying to build programs around employee wellness, mental health, compassion training. But the truth is, we're guessing. We're hiring consultants who've never missed a meal. I want someone who knows how to see people." She blinked. "You want me to teach rich people how not to be cold?" His smile widened. "Something like that." "And why would I be qualified for that?" "Because you didn't look away," he said. "You saw me last night. Not the money, not the name, just a man who was freezing." Elise leaned back in her seat. The coffee had cooled completely now. She stared at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "And if I say no, then I'll say thank you for the sweater, and I'll walk away," he said gently. "No strings, no headlines." She looked out the window again, thinking. The clouds were parting above the city, light bouncing off the rooftops in silver patches. "I don't have a degree," she said. "Neither did I when I started," Nathaniel replied. "I've made mistakes. So have I. I don't belong in a glass tower. Maybe that's why we need you there." Another silence. Finally, Elise reached for her coat. "I'll think about it," she said, standing. Nathaniel rose with her. "That's all I ask." She hesitated, then added, "And, for what it's worth, you didn't look like a billionaire last night." "Good," he said. That version of me needed to be left in the snow. Always. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she turned and walked out into the late morning light, her boots crunching softly on wet pavement, the crayon drawing safe in her pocket. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a hallway of glass, chrome, and hushed conversations. Elise had never seen anything like it. Not in person, at least. She'd cleaned floors in office buildings before, but only at night, when suits had already gone home and the city's other world clocked in through service entrances. This was different. This was daylight. This was front door access. Nathaniel walked a few steps ahead of her, his pace steady but unhurried. He hadn't said much during the car ride, just pointed out quiet details about the city as they passed. This was where his company launched its first office. That alley once had a taco truck he swore made the best late-night food in Manhattan. He wasn't trying to impress her. And for that, Elise was strangely grateful. Now, standing in the heart of Carrington Tech's headquarters, Elise felt the weight of 100 unseen eyes. The executive assistant at reception glanced at her, then at Nathaniel. Elise caught the subtle rise of her brows. "She's with me," Nathaniel said simply. No explanation, no qualifiers. They continued down the hall, past conference rooms named after planets and code-named labs behind frosted glass. People nodded as Nathaniel passed. Some smiled politely, some pretended not to look surprised. Elise kept her gaze forward, her hands tucked in her coat pockets. "You good?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "Still deciding," she replied. He smiled at that. He led her into a side lounge just off the main workspace, a sleek room with warm lighting, plush chairs, and a coffee bar that looked better stocked than most cafes. "This is our reset room," Nathaniel said. "Supposed to help people decompress." Elise looked around. "Looks expensive," he chuckled. "It is, but lately, it's been mostly empty." "Aye. Why?" "Because people here don't know how to stop," he said. "They're good at solving problems, not so good at noticing the people having them." Elise raised an eyebrow. "And you think I can fix that?" "I think you can start something they'll listen to." He gestured for her to sit. She chose a chair near the window, her posture upright, alert. "So what exactly would I do?" she asked. Nathaniel leaned against the edge of a table. "Observe, listen, sit in on meetings, share your perspective, ask the questions we forget to ask." "That sounds vague." "It is," he admitted, "but the role will evolve, just like you did." Elise looked out the window. 25 floors below. The city churned like a restless tide. Taxis, pedestrians, food carts, honking, motion, ambition. Up here, it was another universe. Silent, polished, safe, too safe. "What happens when I say something you don't want to hear?" she asked. "Then I'll listen harder." "I, and the others? They'll get used to it." She turned to him. "No offense, but you can't just walk me into a boardroom and expect people to take advice from a woman they'd normally pass on the street." "Exactly why I should," he said. "Because that's the problem." Elise studied him for a moment. "Would I be the only one like me here?" Nathaniel paused. "Probably." She exhaled slowly. "Then you better be sure. Because once I speak, I won't shrink back." His voice softened. "I don't want you to." A knock on the door interrupted them. It was Miles, holding a folder, eyes flicking briefly to Elise. "Apologies," he said. "Nathaniel, the design team is ready for the 11A. Nathaniel nodded, then turned to Elise. "Come with me." Her eyes narrowed. "To what?" "A meeting. You wanted to know what the job might feel like? Let's find out." Elise stood. "Fine. But if anyone asks why I'm there, they won't," he said. "Because I'll tell them." Well, the design conference room was all glass and angles, a long table surrounded by a dozen people dressed in tailored clothes in tense anticipation. Laptops were open, slides projected onto a seamless digital wall. They were halfway through a presentation about a new wellness app when Nathaniel entered, Elise close behind. The room quieted instantly. No one said anything. But Elise felt it, a ripple of silent judgment. Nathaniel didn't flinch. "This is Elise Thompson," he said calmly. "She's joining as a personal advisor to me and the executive board on internal culture and community alignment." A pause. Then a polite chorus of welcome and stiff nods. Elise didn't smile. She simply took the empty seat at the end of the table, folded her hands in her lap, and listened. The meeting resumed. Talk of interface design, user psychology, demographic testing. Elise said nothing for 15 minutes. Then someone at the table, young, nervous, suggested that the app should target high-achieving professionals only. That way, the young man said, we cut down the noise from users who won't stick with it anyway. Nathaniel glanced at Elise. She cleared her throat, slow and deliberate. Isn't that the point of wellness? She asked aloud. To reach people who are struggling to stick with anything. The room stilled. All eyes turned to her. She met them, unblinking. You can't say you care about mental health and only design for people who already have stability. The room shifted. Some leaned back. Others looked down at their notes. The young man flushed, his lips parting. I didn't mean, you meant efficient, Elise said gently. But compassion isn't efficient, it's deliberate. Nathaniel smiled. That was exactly what he'd hoped for. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. No one said much as they filed out, but a few stole glances at Elise. Not cold, not hostile, curious. Outside, in the hallway, Nathaniel turned to her. So, she exhaled. That room's not made for people like me. Maybe not yet, he said. But that's why I need you in it. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. Then let's see how far this goes. The sky over Long Island was bruised with low gray clouds by the time Elise stepped through the iron gates of the Braxton estate for what she hoped was the last time. Her breath fogged as she walked the stone path, a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder, the same one she'd arrived with 2 years ago, holding just enough clothes to get by, and a framed photo of her daughter tucked deep in the inner pocket. The house behind her, grand, white-pillared, and sharp-edged, stood in icy silence. No one had come to say goodbye. No surprise there. She had been dismissed that morning, just after breakfast. Mrs. Braxton, never one to raise her voice, had informed her in clipped tones that a tray of croissants had gone missing the night before. Elise had explained, truthfully, that she'd taken the leftovers to an elderly neighbor living alone next door. He'd just had surgery. No one had been helping him. Mrs. Braxton didn't care. We can't have staff making independent choices about company property, she'd said. Company, Elise had murmured, stunned. This house, Mrs. Braxton clarified, and everything in it. Now, as Elise stepped onto the street, her cheeks burned from more than cold. She hadn't fought back. Not really. She was too tired. Too used to the world assuming the worst from someone like her. She pulled her coat tighter, thinner now, without the sweater. The sweater. She missed it, oddly. Not just for the warmth, but because it had somehow become part of her armor. And now, it was in the hands of a stranger, a billionaire, apparently, who had found her again and offered something she couldn't name. Elise stopped walking. Snow had begun to fall again. Soft this time. The kind that made the world quiet. She heard it then, the crunch of tires on ice. A car slowing down behind her. She turned. It was him. Nathaniel stepped out of a black SUV, wearing that same coat from the cafe, the collar turned up against the wind. He didn't speak right away. He looked at her, really looked at her like she wasn't someone to rescue, but someone he was relieved to see. You always show up when I'm walking away, Elise said, trying to sound casual. I've been trying to catch up, he replied. She shifted her bag to the other shoulder. You're far from Midtown. So are you. She raised an eyebrow. You followed me? I asked Miles to track your employment file, he admitted. When I found out you'd been let go, I came. To offer another role? He shook his head. To check on you. That surprised her. She tried not to let it show. Well, I'm standing. Not broken. Just unemployed again. Nathaniel stepped closer. Then, let me take you somewhere. Not for a meeting. Not for anything official. Just somewhere I want you to see. Elise hesitated. You don't give up, do you? I gave up once, he said. It cost me more than I want to admit. Reasoned. They good. She looked at him a moment longer. The cold nipping at her cheeks, her lashes catching snowflakes. Fine, she said at last. But I get to pick the radio station. He smiled and held the door open. Deal. The ride back into the city was quiet but not uncomfortable. Elise watched the world blur past strip malls, brownstones, street vendors huddled under tarps. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. For now, she let the silence be enough. 30 minutes later, the car turned down a side street in Brooklyn. It was quieter here, older. The buildings weren't tall. They leaned into each other like tired neighbors sharing secrets. The car stopped in front of a one-story brick building with a faded green awning. A hand-painted wooden sign read, "Thomas's Place, a safe space for every child." Elise's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Nathaniel stepped out and offered her his hand. She took it without thinking. Inside, the air was warm and filled with sounds she hadn't expected: laughter, distant singing, the thump of small feet running down a hallway. The walls were painted with murals, animals, flowers, stars. One long wall was covered with hundreds of colorful handprints, each with a name scrawled underneath. "This place," Nathaniel said softly, "was started by a man named Thomas. He used to run a shelter near where I grew up. I didn't know him well, but once, when I was 12 and too scared to go home, he gave me a place to sleep. No questions, just a blanket and a peanut butter sandwich." Elise looked around slowly. "So you rebuilt it?" He shook his head. "I funded it, but it's the people here who built it." She walked farther in, eyes falling on a bulletin board covered in photos, kids drawing, volunteers reading to toddlers, a calendar of weekend activities. There was joy in this place, not the kind that was loud or performative, the quiet kind, the kind that meant someone had been seen. Nathaniel watched her. "When you gave me that sweater, I felt like someone had reached through the noise and said, 'You matter.' That's what this place does. I want you to be part of it." Elise turned. "Doing what?" "Whatever you want," he said. "Maybe one day a week. Maybe full-time. Maybe just visiting. I don't know yet. But this place needs people like you." She looked down, biting the inside of her cheek. "What if I don't know how to help?" she asked. Nathaniel's voice softened. "You helped me without trying." Silence fell again. From a nearby room, a small boy's voice rang out. "Miss Elise?" She turned, startled. A child no older than 6 ran toward her. She blinked, confused. "That's Jordan," a staff member said, appearing behind him. "He recognized you from the shelter. He said you read to him last week." Elise's eyes widened. "I didn't think he remembered." Iz nodded. "He doesn't forget kindness," the staffer said, smiling. Jordan hugged her legs tightly. Elise froze for a second, then knelt to his level and hugged him back. When she looked up at Nathaniel, her eyes were shining. "I'm still thinking about your offer," she said. "But I think this is a good place to start." Nathaniel nodded. "That's all I hoped for," and for the first time in a long time, Elise didn't feel like she was walking away. She felt like she was walking in. Elise stood just inside the revolving glass doors of Carrington Tech's main headquarters, the lobby buzzing with the low hum of ambition. People moved briskly across the marble floors in polished shoes and tailored suits. Bluetooth headsets blinking blue like tiny neon halos. No one looked at her. Not really. But she felt them noticing anyway: her thrift store coat, her practical shoes, her silence. She wasn't used to places like this. She wasn't used to being seen in them, and certainly not like this. Miles appeared at her side, precise as always, holding a sleek tablet and a visitor badge with her name pre-printed in crisp font. Elise Thompson, Advisor, Human Culture, and Community. She stared at it for a beat, then clipped it to her coat. The title didn't feel real. Not yet. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," Miles said politely. "Mr. Carrington is upstairs waiting for you. He asked that I give you a tour first. If you're comfortable." She glanced around. Comfortable might be a stretch. He offered the smallest of smiles. Noted. "Shall we begin?" They walked the length of the lobby. The scale of the place was intimidating. Glass-paneled offices climbed upward like a crystal fortress. Digital art rotated silently on giant screens, displaying company milestones, philanthropic missions, and quotes from leaders Elise had never heard of. "Over here is the wellness floor," Miles said, gesturing to a quieter hallway. It's where Nathaniel hopes to introduce the cultural programs he discussed with you. Meditation rooms, empathy workshops, flexible scheduling policies. And where exactly do I fit in? Elise interrupted. Miles paused. You'll be meeting with department heads, shadowing team meetings, offering honest observations about how our culture operates from a human perspective. A human perspective, she repeated, with a hint of dry humor. As opposed to what? He tilted his head, not unkindly. As opposed to the kind that's been shaped solely by spreadsheets and software. They stepped into a small elevator that whisked them to the 18th floor. The doors opened into a quiet lounge space, soft lighting. Coffee machines that hissed softly. Shelves lined with books about leadership, innovation, mindfulness. Elise ran a hand across one shelf. Feels like a hotel lobby. A calming aesthetic, Miles said. Intentional. To calm who? She asked. He didn't answer. Nathaniel greeted her just beyond the lounge, dressed not in a suit but in a button-down and jeans. Deliberate, she assumed. You came, he said with a smile that wasn't forced. I said I would, she replied. Still planning to walk out? Always, she said. But not just yet. He gestured to a nearby meeting room, one with a round table and floor-to-ceiling windows. No massive conference screens, no clickers. Just a pot of coffee, a notepad, and a few chairs. This is yours for the day, he said. I want you to meet with a few team leads. Nothing formal, just conversations. Listen, ask, challenge, if you feel it. I don't speak the language, she warned. You speak the truth. That's harder to come by. Elise hesitated. You really believe this will work? I believe in what you make people feel, he said simply. And I believe we forgot how to value that. And the first visitor was a woman in her early 30s, elegantly dressed, head of product development. Her eyes flicked over Elise, trying Elise could tell to place her. Elise smiled. No, I don't work in HR, and I'm not here to audit you, the woman blinked. Then what are you here for? To ask the questions you stopped asking yourself. That made the woman pause. They talked for 20 minutes. Elise asked about burnout, about how often people took their vacation days, about why the wellness space was always empty. The woman answered honestly, but carefully. Elise wrote nothing down. When the next person came in, a junior manager from engineering, he sat stiffly, arms crossed, clearly wary. I've heard about this, he said. Some kind of culture experiment. No experiment, Elise replied. Just one person asking another person how they're really doing. He shrugged. Fine, I guess. You look tired, she said. He blinked. I haven't been sleeping great. Because of work? Because I'm afraid if I slow down, I'll fall behind, and no one's catching me if I do. Elise leaned forward. Then maybe the system's what's broken. Not you. By the end of the day, she had spoken with 6 people. Most didn't know what to make of her. Some seemed relieved, others uncomfortable, but all of them walked away, changed just a little. When Nathaniel returned to the room near sunset, Elise was still seated at the table, hands clasped, staring at the skyline beyond the glass. The light made the windows glow, gold. Well? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, They're not bad people, but they're drowning in good intentions and no time. He nodded. And you? I don't belong here, she said. He stepped forward. Why? Because this building was made for people who already think they matter. We're interrogated. And you think you don't? She turned to him. I know people like me don't get invited into rooms like this. And when we do, it's because someone wants to check a box. Nathaniel's voice dropped. That's not what this is. I know, she said. But they don't know yet. A long pause. Then he asked, Are you staying? Elise stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the world far below. I'm staying for the ones who don't have a voice in these meetings, for the janitor whose name no one knows, for the receptionist who flinches when she's corrected, for the interns who think they're invisible. Nathaniel said nothing. He didn't need to, because in that moment, they both understood. This wasn't about her fitting in. It was about her holding the door open. The following week moved like fog through Elise's mind. Thick, quiet, Strange. She showed up every morning. Always early. Always with her bag slung across one shoulder, and that same second-hand coat buttoned all the way up. Even inside, there was comfort in the ritual. A shield, maybe. Nathaniel had given her freedom, no schedule, no quotas, no reports to file. Just listen, he kept saying, and speak when you feel moved to. So that's what she did. She wandered through the building like a ghost, with purpose. She visited the kitchens and sat with cafeteria workers during their breaks. She stepped into engineering departments, not to offer expertise, but to ask how people were sleeping. She lingered near elevators just long enough to catch the kinds of conversations executives never heard, the whispers, the jokes, the frustrations buried under courtesy. The strange part? People began to talk, not all at once, and not always kindly. But slowly, pieces of truth began to surface. By Friday afternoon, she was back in the reset room, flipping through a notebook she'd started using. Not for notes, just fragments, phrases, things people said that stayed with her. I don't remember the last time my manager asked me how I was really doing. We have yoga classes, but no one dares leave their desk at noon. If I cry in the bathroom, does that count as a break? The door opened, and to her surprise, it wasn't Nathaniel, it was Miles. He was rarely anywhere unannounced. "May I?" he asked, motioning to the seat across from her. Elise nodded. "Sure. Just don't expect enlightenment." He sat, folding his hands neatly in front of him. "I wanted to talk. Not as Nathaniel's assistant. Just as a man who's watched this place for a long time." She closed the notebook, intrigued. "All right. I didn't think this would work," Miles said, looking her in the eye. "I thought bringing you here was symbolic, temporary. A PR move dressed up in sincerity. Is another one. Thanks," she said dryly. He smiled faintly. "But I was wrong. I've been listening, watching, and people are saying things in meetings they never said before." Elise studied him. "What changed their minds?" "You did." She looked away. "I'm not doing anything revolutionary." "No," Miles agreed. "You're doing something dangerous." That made her blink. "You're making people feel again," he said softly. "This place runs on logic, metrics, clean code, and cleaner answers. Feelings get in the way. But you're teaching people to look inward. And that scares them." She leaned back, her arms crossing. "I'm not trying to scare anyone." "Maybe not," Miles said, "but truth always does." A long silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, Elise asked, "Do you believe in this, Miles? This whole idea of changing culture from the inside?" His jaw tensed. "I believe the machine will eat you alive if you're not careful." "That's not a no." "No," he said, finally. "It's not." Just then, her phone buzzed. A text from Nathaniel. "Come to 20th floor. Now. Something's happening." She stood, eyebrows raised. "Looks like we're about to test the theory." The 20th floor conference room was full when Elise walked in. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table, tension in his shoulders. Around him sat 5 department leads and 2 members of the board, polished, powerful, and clearly displeased. Elise slid into a chair near the back. "We need to address the situation," one of the board members said sharply, a silver-haired woman with eyes like steel. "What situation?" Nathaniel asked calmly. "Your new advisor," she said, gesturing in Elise's direction without even looking at her. "She's causing unrest." Elise lifted an eyebrow but said nothing. "Multiple employees have reported emotional discomfort," the woman continued. "There's confusion about her authority, her role. This kind of unsanctioned internal audit could create liability." Nathaniel glanced at Elise. She met his gaze without blinking. "She's not auditing," he said. "She's observing, helping us uncover what's real." "She's not qualified," another man chimed in. "No formal background in organizational psychology, no corporate training." "Neither did I when I started this company," Nathaniel replied. "But you built it," the woman snapped. "I built something that ran efficiently," he said, "but not something that always cared. That's what Elise is here to help fix." The room quieted. Elise could feel the disdain, the doubt. Not overt, just simmering. So she stood. I didn't come here to be a threat, she said. I came here to tell the truth. All eyes turned to her. I know I don't look like you. I didn't go to the same schools. I didn't climb the same ladders. But I've cleaned your floors. I've heard your night staff cry in bathrooms you've never set foot in. I've watched cafeteria workers skip meals so your meetings could run over without interruption. A breath. No one interrupted. You think you're building a culture. But what you've built is an illusion. One that rewards silence and punishes honesty. And I'm not angry at that. I'm sad for it. Because there's so much good here, so much potential. But until you see the cracks, you can't fix what's broken. Silence. She gathered her coat. I don't need this job. I didn't come for a title. If you want me gone, just say so. But don't pretend it's because I'm disruptive. Pretend it's because I made you feel something you didn't want to face. She turned to leave. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like steady thunder. She stays. No one argued. Not out loud, at least. And as Elise walked out of the room, her heartbeat was steady not from fear, but from clarity. She hadn't come to fit in. She'd come to be a mirror, even if that mirror made people uncomfortable. The winter sun cast long amber streaks across the hardwood floors of the executive wing. Up here, time moved differently, quieter, smoother, more detached from the chaos of the cubicles below. Elise stepped off the elevator, her boots still slightly wet from slush, her coat folded over her arm. She hadn't been invited, but she wasn't in the mood to ask permission. She walked past the glass conference rooms where assistants typed quickly and doors whispered shut behind leather shoes. She headed straight for the office at the end of the hallway. The one with the corner view, the walnut door, and the nameplate that read, Clinton Vaughn, Chief Operating Officer. She knocked once, firmly. A pause. Come in, said a clipped voice. Elise entered. The man behind the desk barely looked up. Silver hair combed back with discipline, gold cufflinks, a framed Harvard diploma behind him, angled just so. He was the kind of man who made rooms quieter when he entered, not through charm, but sheer weight. Miss Thompson, he said coolly, finally glancing at her. I was wondering when you might show up. She didn't smile. You sent the board after me. I voiced concerns. I didn't instruct anything. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Have a seat. I prefer to stand. Suit yourself. He leaned back, folding his hands. Let me be clear. This experiment of Nathaniel's? It's destabilizing the internal order. People are distracted. Productivity is dipping. And your presence is encouraging employees to question structures they don't fully understand. Maybe they understand more than you think, Elise replied evenly. He raised a brow. Do you have any idea what it takes to run a company of this size, to keep thousands employed? One false move, one moment of internal dissent, and we lose investor confidence. While I've crassed it have kerned. So the truth is only welcome when it fits your narrative. The truth, he said, standing slowly, is expensive, and it has to be managed like anything else. Elise stepped closer to the desk. Then maybe what you're running isn't a company. It's a stage play, and the cast is exhausted. Clinton's jaw tensed. You don't belong in this world, Miss Thompson. You're right, she said. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. A silence fell between them. Elise took a slow breath. Do you know what it feels like to be spoken over? To have your instincts dismissed because they don't fit into a spreadsheet? I know what it feels like, he said stiffly, to carry the burden of decisions no one else wants to make. Then maybe we're not so different, she said. Except I still care how people feel about the weight I carry. Clinton said nothing. His fingers tapped once on the desk, then stopped. I'll be honest, Elise continued. I came here expecting to be underestimated. And I was. But I stayed because I saw potential in this place. And in Nathaniel. He's trying to build something new. And whether you like it or not, that is leadership. You think emotion is a leadership trait? I think compassion is, she said. And you'd be surprised what people are willing to do for a leader they believe actually sees them. He exhaled slowly. Nathaniel trusts you. He listens, Elise corrected. There's a difference. I was no. He studied her now. truly studied her. Not as a statistic, not as a disruptor, but as someone who might not go away. "I'm not the villain," he said after a long pause. "I didn't say you were," she replied. "But sometimes villains are just people who stopped listening." She turned toward the door. "You know," she added over her shoulder, "the company culture doesn't die when people leave. It dies when they stay and stop believing." Then she left. Later that evening, Elise stood alone in the staff kitchen on the 10th floor, pouring a cup of stale coffee and watching the city lights blink in the distance. Most employees had gone home, but this place never really slept. She pulled her notebook from her bag and opened to a blank page. This time, she didn't write a quote. She drew something instead. A crack, not a gash, not a break. Just a fine, jagged line across the page like the beginning of a fracture in glass. The kind you could pretend wasn't there until it spread. She traced it twice. Nathaniel found her there 20 minutes later. He said nothing at first, just leaned against the counter, eyes on her sketch. "Clinton called me," he finally said. "Said you gave him quite the sermon." "Wasn't a sermon," Elise muttered. "Just honesty. He said you made him uncomfortable." "Good. So did your heating system in that alley." Nathaniel laughed under his breath. "He's not going to change overnight." I'm not here for overnight," Elise said. "I'm here for the long haul, or until you cave." He nodded, taking a sip of her bad coffee. "You know, you're not who I expected." She looked up. "Neither are you." Silence. Then he said, "We're planning a town hall next week, open floor. Anonymous questions. I want you there. Not in the back. Beside me." Elise raised an eyebrow. "That'll go over well. Maybe not, but it'll go over real." She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "But if anyone throws a stapler, I'm ducking first." Nathaniel smiled. And just for a moment, amidst the glass and steel, the two of them shared something rare. Not strategy, not spin, but solidarity. The auditorium at Carrington Tech was rarely used. It was a sleek, modern amphitheater, carved into the lower level of the building, more a performance venue than a corporate space. On that Thursday morning, the room buzzed with curiosity, tension, and whispers. Employees filed in slowly, filling row after row of padded seats. No one knew exactly what to expect. "Town hall," the calendar invite had said. "Open floor. Come with honesty." Most assumed it was a morale stunt, until they saw Elise. She stood on stage beside Nathaniel Carrington, no podiums, no prepared speeches, just the two of them, and a single microphone on a stand. The pairing felt almost surreal. Elise in her pressed black slacks, thrifted blouse, and unruly curls. Nathaniel, in his usual muted tones, his expression calm but unreadable. Miles stood in the wings, eyes scanning the crowd. Clinton Vaughn had taken a seat in the front row, arms crossed, flanked by department heads and two board members. Elise felt the temperature of the room shift when he entered. But she didn't flinch. She stood there like she belonged, because she did. Nathaniel stepped forward first. "Thank you all for coming," he said, voice even. "We're here to try something different today. No product announcements, no shareholder updates, just people talking to people." A few uneasy chuckles rolled through the room. "I brought someone here weeks ago to help me and help us see the truth we've stopped looking for. Some of you have spoken with her. Some of you have questioned her presence. That's fine. Today, we stop pretending we're perfect. We start listening." He stepped back. Elise took a slow breath and moved to the mic. "I won't take long," she said. "I'm not a speech maker. I'm just a woman who believes in asking questions." She looked over the crowd. "So let's begin with the one that really matters. Are you okay?" Silence. She let it sit. "Not just today. Not just now. But in this place. In your role. In your body. In your life. Are you okay?" No one answered. But something shifted. She gestured to the side screen, where a live stream of anonymous messages began to appear, submitted through a private app. Words flickered to life. "I cry in my car during lunch breaks. I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years because I'm scared I'll be replaced. I had a miscarriage and told no one. I filed sick leave under stomach bug." Gasps. A few muffled sobs. Nathaniel didn't move. His face was tight, focused. Clinton stared straight ahead. "This is your truth," Elise said. "You don't have to apologize for it." A hand rose from the back, a young woman with tired eyes. She stood. "How do we fix this?" Elise looked to Nathaniel. He stepped forward again. "By doing something we've forgotten how to do. Admit we're wrong. Admit we need help. And let people like Elise, people with lived experience, show us what empathy actually looks like." Another hand rose. A man in his 50s, graying at the temples. "I've been here 12 years, he said. "This is the first time anyone asked if I was okay." That got quiet applause. Another message lit up on the screen. "I've hidden my depression for 6 months. I thought I'd be seen as weak." Elise stepped closer to the mic. "Strength isn't pretending you're fine. It's asking for help even when you don't know what the answer will be." From the corner of her eye, she saw Clinton shift, his arms uncrossed. Another voice spoke up. A janitor in a navy blue uniform. "I've been working nights for years. We're not allowed to use the staff gym." Elise looked to Nathaniel. "Starting today," he said. "You are." That brought applause. Real, thunderous applause. Someone called out from the side. "What about the unpaid overtime requests being ignored?" Nathaniel looked at Miles, who made a quick note. "They'll be reviewed and back paid where appropriate. I'll see to it." Elise watched the room change. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. People stood, voices joined, some hesitant, others emboldened by the bravery around them. They spoke of broken systems, of microaggressions, of mentorship that never came, of the loneliness behind title promotions, of the hunger for kindness in high places. And through it all, Elise stood steady. A woman from the back, a cafeteria worker Elise had shared lunch with just days before, raised her hand timidly. "Can I just say something?" Nathaniel nodded. "I don't know much about tech, but I do know what dignity looks like. And today, it walked into this room." She looked at Elise. "Thank you." Elise blinked back something sharp in her throat. The meeting lasted over 2 hours. By the end, people weren't just clapping, they were standing. Not for Nathaniel. Not even for Elise. But for each other. Later that night, long after the room had emptied, Elise sat alone on the stage, legs dangling over the edge. Her notebook rested in her lap, pages full now of phrases, truths, tiny fractures mended by courage. Nathaniel joined her quietly, taking a seat beside her. "You good?" he asked. She gave a soft, exhausted smile. Still deciding. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "Today was a crack in the wall." He looked at her. "A good one?" "The kind light comes through," she said. Nathaniel let the words settle. "I meant what I said up there," he added. "I want to build something better, but I can't do it without you." Elise looked at him, truly looked. "I'm not your fixer, Nathaniel," she said. "I know. I'm not your project. I know that too." She paused. "But I am your partner. As long as we're building something that includes all of us." He nodded, a weight in his chest lifting. "Then let's keep going," he said. And in the quiet of the empty auditorium, with broken truths echoing softly in the rafters, they made an unspoken vow to build not a perfect company, but an honest one. Elise stood at the edge of her old neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, the winter wind biting at her scarf as she stared up at the crumbling brownstone she hadn't stepped foot in for nearly 10 years. The bricks were tired, sagging in places, like an old man trying to stand proud. Her gloved hand gripped a paper bag with 2 small containers of homemade stew, the kind she'd learned to make from watching her mother, a recipe full of memory and stubborn hope. Today wasn't about Carrington Tech. It wasn't about Nathaniel, or culture reforms, or town halls. It was about coming home. She climbed the steps slowly. The door was painted a dull red now, chipped and faded. The building still smelled of rust, oil, and forgotten rent. She knocked twice, then hesitated. A shuffling sound came from within. Then, the door creaked open. "Lord have mercy," whispered a voice aged with time and smoke. Elise Marie Thompson. The woman who opened the door was shorter now, thinner, with silver in her braids and hands that trembled. But her eyes, sharp and unrelenting, still carried that same mixture of love and disappointment that Elise remembered too well. "Hi, Mama," Elise said softly. Her mother didn't move at first. Then, with a long sigh that held back tears, she stepped aside. "Get in here. You're letting the cold talk too long." Elise walked inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. The apartment was warm but sparse. A new tenant must have moved into the unit next door. Children's laughter trickled faintly through the wall. Elise set the bag down on the kitchen table, the same rickety table where she once did homework, cried over rejection letters, and watched her mother write rent checks with shaking hands. "I brought you stew," Elise said, unsure of how to begin. Her mother eased into the chair opposite her, slowly, as if life itself had become a negotiation. "Didn't know you remembered how to cook." "I didn't forget," Elise said. "Just had to cook for different reasons." A pause. Then her mother asked, "You working now?" "Yeah," Elise nodded. "Corporate, sort of." "Corporate?" Her mother gave a sharp laugh. "They finally let you in?" "They didn't let me in," Elise said. "I walked in, and I stayed." Silence settled between them again. Her mother reached for the container, peeled back the lid, and inhaled deeply. "Smells like your Aunt Thelma's version," she muttered. "She taught me. Course she did. Always knew you'd listen to her before you listened to me." Elise smiled faintly. "I listen to you more than you think." Her mother didn't answer. She simply took a slow bite, chewing like every spoonful was a memory. After a long while, she asked, "Why now?" "What do you mean?" "You disappeared, baby. After everything with your father, after the eviction, after you lost the baby." Elise flinched. "I didn't disappear," she said. "I survived." Her mother's eyes glistened. "And now you're back." "I'm trying to understand who I was. Before they made me believe I wasn't enough. Oh, is all down." Her mother sat back, letting the words sink in. The lines around her mouth softened. "Still stubborn," she said. "Runs in the family." They both chuckled softly, cautiously, like testing if the moment would break under laughter. Then Elise asked the question that had haunted her for years. "Did you ever think I wouldn't make it?" Her mother looked at her. Truly looked. "No," she said. "But I worried you'd stop trying." Elise lowered her gaze. "I almost did." "Then don't stop now," was Drika. Later that evening, Elise walked the streets of her old block. Nothing had changed, and everything had. The corner store still sold dollar sodas. The bus stop still had a cracked bench, but the faces had changed. The silence of old neighbors gone, replaced by new ones who didn't know her name or her history. She paused outside the community center where she used to volunteer after school. A flyer flapped against the glass window, "Free winter coat drive." She stepped inside. The woman behind the desk was young, distracted by her phone. But when she looked up, she smiled warmly. "Can I help you?" Elise nodded. "Yeah, I'd like to donate some coats. Good ones. Really." The woman perked up. "We're low this week. It's been cold." Elise smiled. "I know." She wrote down her number. "I'll bring them by next Monday." "You with a church or group?" "No," Elise said. "Just someone who used to need one." "I am Zell." Back at her apartment that night, Elise sat at her kitchen table, her notebook open in front of her. She didn't write a quote or a line of reflection. She wrote a name, Elise Marie Thompson. Below it, she wrote, "Black, woman, mother, wounded, standing, still here." She stared at it for a while, then flipped to the next page. At the top, she wrote, "People I believe in." The first name she wrote wasn't Nathaniel, it was her own. The Monday morning after her visit home, Elise returned to Carrington Tech carrying more than just her leather satchel and coat. She carried weight of memory, of roots, of a woman both broken and blooming. There was something settled in her now. Not peace, not yet, but steadiness. As she walked through the lobby, the security guard, an older black man named Marvin, gave her a nod. Not the kind that asked for a badge, but the kind that said, "I see you." She smiled back. "Morning, Marvin." You made the whole place look different last week," he said, his voice low, respectful. "Just wanted to say that." Elise paused. "It looked different to me, too." In the elevator, she rode in silence with a young intern and a VP who didn't recognize her. When the doors opened on the 18th floor, she stepped into what used to be just another hallway. Now it felt like familiar ground. Nathaniel was waiting near her borrowed workspace, sipping coffee from a paper cup, eyes distant, until he spotted her. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's clearer," she said. "Went back to Brooklyn this weekend." His expression shifted. "Home? For better or worse?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," she said. "But it reminded me why I'm here." End quote. Nathaniel gestured toward the glass walls of the common area, where team leads were already filtering in for the week's leadership sync. "Want to sit in?" She gave a knowing look. "You mean crash it, like I always do?" "You've earned the right to stop knocking," he said. "Just walk in." Inside the room, the tension was more brittle than usual. Ever since the town hall, things had changed, not on the surface, not yet, but below. Beneath smiles and meeting notes, something was shifting. As Elise entered, a few heads turned. Clinton Vaughn, seated near the end of the table, offered a tight nod. Miles was already there, stylus tapping on his tablet, eyes flicking from face to face. Nathaniel took his place but didn't sit. "We're not going to do a typical sync today," he said. "No updates, no decks. I want to revisit what we started last week. Honesty, culture, accountability." The room remained still. "Starting with a question," he added. "Elise?" She stepped forward, notebook in hand but closed. "Everyone here talks about leadership," she began. "But let's talk about followership. Who do your employees believe in? Who do they trust enough to follow when things get hard?" No one answered. She looked at Clinton. "Mr. Vaughn, may I ask you something directly?" He stiffened. "Of course. What would happen if the mailroom manager resigned tomorrow?" Clinton blinked. "The mailroom? We'd find a replacement. Is Dility. But who would notice?" Elise asked. "Who would feel it?" Silence. "I've walked this building," she continued, "and I've seen people more loyal to their co-workers than to their managers. That's not a failure of job description, it's a failure of trust." Clinton didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. Nathaniel chimed in. "We've built a hierarchy that rewards results but ignores relationships. That ends today." One of the department heads, a woman in marketing, raised her hand. "And what does that look like in practice? Culture can't just be mood, lighting, and yoga." "True," Elise said. "It starts with visibility. It continues with listening. But it's sustained by action." Another voice from the table, Jeffrey, the head of engineering. "So what? We start writing thank you cards? Give out hugs?" "No," Elise said, unfazed. "You start knowing the names of your team's children. You notice when someone hasn't spoken in 3 meetings. You stop treating burnout as a badge of honor." The room quieted again. Then, surprisingly, Clinton spoke. "Last week," he said slowly, "someone in facilities approached me in the parking garage, called me by my first name, told me he felt seen for the first time. I didn't know what to say." Elise tilted her head. "Did it scare you?" He nodded once. "A little." "That's good," she said. "Fear means you're paying attention." After the meeting, Elise stepped outside to the rooftop terrace. The sky was pale blue, the wind brisk but bearable. She leaned on the railing, notebook pressed to her chest. Nathaniel joined her minutes later. "I've never seen Clinton quiet for that long," he said. "He's listening. That's a start." "You're changing things, Elise." She looked at him. "We are." "No," he said, turning toward her. "I started a company, but you're building a conscience inside it." She considered that. "You think people can really change?" she asked. "I think they can't afford not to." A gust of wind caught a loose strand of her hair. She didn't bother tucking it back. It danced freely like her thoughts. "I don't want this to just be performative," she said. "Then don't let it be." She nodded slowly. "I won't." Nathaniel looked at her, his voice dropping. "And when it's time, when this phase ends, what do you want to do next?" She thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "Open a center. Not for profit. For people. A space where voices like mine aren't the exception, they're the rule. Nathaniel extended his hand, not with formality, but with friendship. Let me know how I can help. She took it, firm and sure. You already are. That night, Elise walked past her old thrift store in the city, the one where she'd once begged for warmth. It had closed down. Empty shelves stared through dusty windows, but instead of sadness, she felt something like gratitude. Not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need leaving behind. A week later, Elise stood in front of a whiteboard in what had once been a forgotten break room on the 12th floor. Now, thanks to her persistence and Nathaniel's approval, it was something else. A listening room. No monitors, no clocks, just a semicircle of chairs, a tea kettle in the corner, and a sign on the door that read, "Come as you are, stay as long as you need." The room wasn't mandatory. No memos were sent. But word traveled. One by one, people started trickling in: janitors, programmers, analysts, and even one executive who claimed he got lost, but stayed for 20 minutes anyway. Today, she had 3 visitors. Sheila from HR, Dominic from accounting, and Neera, a UX designer whose voice trembled every time she spoke in meetings. "So," Elise said, pulling up a chair, "we don't have an agenda. Just space. What's been on your heart lately?" For a moment, silence reigned. Then Sheila broke it. "I've been doing HR for 19 years, she said. "And this is the first place where I feel like I'm always protecting the company. Never the people." Dominic nodded. "I process payroll. I see who gets bonuses. I see who doesn't." Neera looked down. "Sometimes I wonder if I only got hired to meet a quota. Not because I belong." Elise listened. She didn't correct them, didn't minimize. She just let the words land. "I used to think pain had to be loud to matter," Elise said quietly. "But most systems break in silence. That's why rooms like this exist." They talked for nearly an hour. No solutions. Just truths, laid bare like scars after winter. Before they left, Elise handed each of them a card. It was simple, just their name and handwritten script with a short note. "I see you. I believe you. You matter," Neera cried. That afternoon, Elise joined Nathaniel for a walk through the lower levels of the campus. They passed data centers, shipping bays, and training rooms. Nathaniel moved like a man relearning his kingdom, slower, more observant. "We've been scheduling listening room rotations across departments," Elise explained. "Voluntary. No pressure. But people are signing up." Nathaniel raised a brow. "Even Clinton?" "Not yet," she smirked. "But I have hope." They stopped near the main floor, where an old bulletin board still hung, faded and cluttered with outdated flyers. Elise paused, pulling one down. "A company picnic from 2019. You ever notice," she said, "that most corporate culture happens in the margins, hallways, elevators, kitchens?" Nathaniel nodded. "Places without PowerPoint. That's where people feel safe to be real," she said. "And when the margins disappear, so does the honesty." He studied her. "What would you do if you were CEO?" She laughed. "Fire half the C-suite and replace them with custodians and cafeteria workers." He grinned. "Brutal. Honest," she said. A pause. "Truthfully," she added, "I'd create a department that doesn't produce, doesn't sell, doesn't pitch, just listens, tracks morale, flags, blind spots, holds people accountable when policy fails humans." "Like internal affairs?" "No," she said. "More like internal empathy." He considered this. "Would you run it?" "I'd rather build it," she replied. "Train someone else to run it. Someone whose voice isn't usually heard." That night, Elise received a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I was at the town hall. I haven't said a word in a meeting for 3 years. But today, I asked a question. Thank you." A quiet analyst. She stared at the message for a long time, then added a new entry in her notebook. "Echoes. Even whispers change things when they travel far enough." 3 days later, Elise received an email marked urgent. It was from Miles. Subject: HR complaint. Executive misconduct. Body: you need to see this. It's real. And it's ugly. Elise read the attached file. Her hands went cold. A female employee had submitted an anonymous report through the town hall feedback system one Elise had helped implement. The complaint described months of verbal intimidation and inappropriate remarks. From a high-ranking executive, Clinton Vaughn. Elise exhaled, heart hammering. She had asked for honesty. And now, it had arrived. What she did next could shatter everything. But the truth had always been heavy, and she had been carrying it her whole life. The next morning, Elise sat at her desk, the complaint file still open on her screen, the words glowing like coals. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, then stilled. She didn't print it. She didn't forward it. Not yet. She closed her laptop gently, as if anything louder would break the fragile line between what was known and what was about to be done. Across the hall, the executive wing buzzed with its usual choreography, heels on tile. Polite nods, silent glances of practiced distance. But Elise didn't move. Not yet. She stared out the window, letting the rhythm of the city below slow her thoughts. Then, as if pulled by something ancient and invisible, she opened her notebook. She flipped past the quotes and the names and the affirmations until she landed on the page titled, "What It Will Cost." She had written it weeks ago. On the list were 4 words: comfort, favor, silence, safety. She placed a check mark beside each one. When she finally stood before Nathaniel's office, her knock was softer than usual. He looked up immediately, the shift in her eyes telling him everything. "Come in," he said, voice low. She entered and sat across from him. "I need you to listen," she said, her tone calm, but sharpened by something weighty. Nathaniel set aside his phone. "I'm listening. Do I haven't be doing life." Elise slid the printed report across the desk. He read silently. By the 3rd paragraph, his brow furrowed. By the 4th, he closed his eyes. "It came through the town hall system," she said. "Anonymous. But I believe it's true. I can feel it. And you need to know Clinton is named." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Elise continued. "This isn't just about inappropriate comments. It's coercion, threats, the kind of abuse that stays hidden because people are too scared to speak." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "This could blow everything open." "It should," she said. A long silence passed between them. Nathaniel finally asked, "Do you know who submitted it?" "I have a strong guess," she said, "but I won't violate their trust." Nathaniel stood, walking slowly to the window. "He's been here almost since the beginning," he said. "He helped build this company." Elise nodded. "Which is why this matters. If someone like him can operate unchecked, it says something about the entire structure." Nathaniel turned back to her. "You know what happens if this gets out. The board will close ranks. PR will spin. Lawyers will swarm." "Good," Elise said. "Let them. But don't silence this woman. Don't bury her because it's easier to pretend we're better than we are." Nathaniel stared at her. "You're not afraid, are you?" he said. "I'm terrified," Elise replied. "But I've been afraid my whole life, and fear has never once saved me. Truth has." He returned to his desk, hands steepled. "What do you want me to do? Launch a formal investigation?" "Quiet. For now, but real. External counsel. Not internal. And make it clear, if this is credible, there will be consequences. No matter who it is." Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. Then he reached for his phone. "I'll call our general counsel," he said. "And I'll speak to the board today. I weigh." She rose from her seat, heart racing. "Thank you," she said. As she turned to leave, Nathaniel called after her. "Elise?" She looked back. "You didn't come here to fix things," he said. "But you're doing it anyway." She gave a tired smile. "I didn't come to fix. I came to expose. What you do with that is up to you." Later that afternoon, Elise walked into the listening room again. It was empty. She sat down, closed her eyes, and breathed. This was the cost. Trust lost, powers stirred, stability shaken. But somewhere in that storm, a woman was waiting to be believed. Waiting for the world to say, "You're not invisible." Elise didn't know what would come next, but she knew this much. She had made a vow, long ago. while clutching a second-hand coat in the snow. I will not keep quiet so others can remain comfortable. Not anymore. The following day began like any other at Carrington Tech. Coffee machines hummed, keyboards clacked, and executives shuffled from one glass-walled meeting to the next. But beneath the surface, something different coursed through the air. A tremor, not yet visible, but coming. Elise walked the halls with her usual quiet focus. She said little, but her presence was no longer questioned. Where once she'd been an outsider with temporary status, now people stepped aside for her, greeted her, nodded in silent alliance. Rumors were already whispering. The town hall had lit a spark. The listening rooms had fed it. And now, the investigation was stoking it into something else entirely. Truth. And the truth was, Clinton Vaughn was under review. Not a whisper anymore. A storm. In the boardroom, Nathaniel sat with general counsel, a woman named Rosa Delgado, sharp-eyed, no nonsense, with 30 years of experience sniffing out rot inside shiny organizations. Her binder was thick, her tone was direct. "There's enough here to proceed," she said, voice calm but grave. "Several statements corroborate the original complaint. Unofficial, yes, but clear patterns of behavior. Verbal degradation, veiled threats, targeting of junior women." Nathaniel sighed, rubbing his eyes. Clinton hadn't been formally confronted. Not yet, but it was coming. "We have to act fast," Rosa added. "Leaks are inevitable." "And the board?" he asked. "They'll resist," she said. "Clinton's part of the furniture. He helped write the employee handbook. But if you back me, I'll push this through. We don't protect predators. Not anymore." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "You have my backing." Just as Elise had warned, this wasn't about one man. It was about whether a company could hold itself accountable when the rot was in the walls. Meanwhile, Elise found herself in an unexpected place, the 21st floor executive lounge, Clinton's domain. She'd come to retrieve a forgotten folder left in a conference room. But when the elevator doors opened, Clinton himself was standing there, alone, pouring himself coffee from a silver carafe. "Elise," he said flatly. She didn't move. "Mr. Vaughn." He stirred cream into his cup, slowly. His silence was heavier than usual. "I suppose you've been busy," he said at last, not turning to face her. She didn't answer. "Funny, isn't it?" he continued. "The culture of transparency, of healing. Suddenly, everyone wants to feel seen." She stepped forward slightly. "People don't want to feel seen. They want to be safe." He finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, but hard. "You think you've done something noble here? I think I've made it harder for people like you to hide," she said quietly. A beat of silence. Clinton set his cup down. "You think I'm scared?" "No," Elise said, stepping past him toward the conference room. "I think you're angry, because someone finally told the truth louder than your power could silence." She opened the door, then turned back, meeting his gaze one last time. "You didn't fall," she added. "You unraveled, one thread at a time. And now everyone can see the seams." By Friday, the internal memo was released. Brief, direct, carefully worded. "Effective immediately, Mr. Clinton Vaughn will step away from his role as COO, pending an independent review of workplace conduct." No spin, no denial. Just enough truth to begin cleaning what had long been swept beneath the marble floors. The company froze. Then, quietly, began to breathe again. Some gasped, others wept, but most especially those who had once lowered their eyes in the hallway lifted their heads a little higher that day. Later that evening, Elise stood with Nathaniel outside the headquarters. Snow flurried lightly. Street lamps cast gold halos across the sidewalk. "He didn't go quietly," Nathaniel said, hands in his coat pockets. "They never do," Elise replied. "Do you regret it?" "No," she said. "I regret it took this long." He studied her face, weathered, determined. "You've become this company's conscience," he said. "I don't want to be the conscience," she replied. "I want the whole system to have one." A moment of stillness. Then she asked, "Do you remember the first time you saw me?" Nathaniel chuckled softly. "Of course. In the snow, giving your only coat to a stranger. You thought I was reckless." "No," he said. "I thought you were rare." She looked down the street, where the city moved in quiet rhythm. "Everyone thinks truth is about shouting," she said. But sometimes it's just staying, not leaving, not letting go, not backing down. You stayed, he said. I stayed. She looked at him. Now let's make sure the next woman who walks through these doors doesn't have to fight this hard just to be heard. Nathaniel nodded. Together, they turned back toward the building. The glass walls reflected the city and all its stories. But inside those walls, change had finally begun. Not because the powerful gave it freely, but because someone demanded it. The weekend came, bringing with it a fragile kind of stillness. For the first time in weeks, Elise allowed herself to sleep past dawn, to drink her coffee while it was still hot, and to sit by the window without a laptop or notebook in her lap. But even in this quiet, her mind pulsed with stories not her own, but those of people who had stopped her in the hallway, written her late-night emails, slipped notes into listening room boxes, and on Sunday afternoon, she returned to them, not as a consultant, not as a disruptor, but as someone who stayed. The staff cafeteria was nearly empty when she arrived. No polished PR teams, no executives rehearsing company values, just a few cafeteria workers, janitors, and administrative assistants taking their late break. She approached the long table where Sheila, the HR rep, now sat with Dominic and Nira, the two who'd first attended her listening room. Elise carried a large paper bag. I brought cake, she said with a small smile. The kind my mom used to make. Chocolate, heavy, honest. They laughed. Girl, Sheila said, you bring that kind of cake, you can sit anywhere you want. They shared slices, small talk turning into real talk. Dominic spoke of the way his department was now discussing blind bonus reviews. Nira admitted she'd submitted a design concept she used to be too afraid to share. You did this, Dominic said to Elise. No, Elise replied. We did this. But if you hadn't spoken first, Nira said, none of us would have. Elise smiled, then said something she hadn't planned. I almost quit 3 times during this. They blinked, surprised. Why? Sheila asked. Because the pushback wasn't always loud, Elise said. Sometimes it was silence. The kind that creeps in and convinces you none of it matters. She looked around the table. But then I remembered. I've seen silence destroy people. I won't be part of it. Monday arrived with a new announcement. Carrington Tech would launch a new division. The Department of Integrity and Inclusion, headed by Rosa Delgado, built on the listening room model Elise had established. It would include anonymous feedback systems, regular equity audits, and a standing committee of cross-department employees from every level. Not just the top. Elise would not lead the department. She insisted she wouldn't. I'm not the final voice, she told Nathaniel. Just the first loud one. Let someone else rise. And someone did. Nira was offered a lead role in the committee's formation. She cried when Elise told her. It's yours now, Elise said, squeezing her hand. Build it the way you wished it had been when you walked in. On her last official day at Carrington Tech, Elise walked through the building one final time. Each floor held memories now. The boardroom where truth cracked the walls. The stairwell where she first overheard whispered doubts. The executive suite where she had confronted a giant and didn't flinch. She stopped by the glass entry doors, her reflection merging with the city beyond. Nathaniel approached quietly. You're sure about this? He asked. Yes, she said. This was a season, not the whole story. He looked at her with something more than respect, gratitude. You changed me, he said. Elise turned to him, eyes steady. No, you changed you. I just asked the question no one else dared to. They shook hands, but the goodbye didn't feel final. Not between allies, not between people who saw the cracks and chose to stay anyway. That evening, Elise returned to the community center in Brooklyn. The coat drive was in full swing now, kids laughing, volunteers sorting donations, an older man in a Santa hat playing jazz on a trumpet by the entrance. Elise slipped quietly into the crowd, a bag of new coats in her arms. Ma'am? A young volunteer asked. Can I help you check those in? She handed over the bag, then smiled. No need. I've done my part. Just here to watch the warmth grow. The girl looked confused, but nodded. Elise stepped back, watching a little boy wrap himself in a coat 3 sizes too big, laughing with joy. And then she saw it. A young woman, nervous, clutching her baby to her chest, standing by the donation table, eyes darting around. Elise approached slowly. "Hey," she said gently. The woman looked up, startled. Elise nodded toward the baby. "How old?" "4 months," she whispered. "Cold out there today." The woman nodded. I didn't know where else to go." Elise took off her own scarf, warm, thick, lined with fleece, and wrapped it around the woman's neck. "You came to the right place," she said. "You're not invisible here." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Elise smiled. "I've been where you are," she said, "and I'm still standing. So will you." Ode. The two of them stood there for a while, two women on opposite ends of a hard road, one remembering, one beginning. It was nearly spring when the letter arrived. Elise had since moved into a small walk-up apartment on the edge of Harlem. Sunlight spilled into the kitchen in the late afternoon, and the sound of a nearby church choir often filled the Sunday air. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't silence. It was life. And for the first time in years, it was hers. That morning, a white envelope with Carrington Tech's embossed seal slipped through her mail slot. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in steady, familiar script. Inside was a letter. "Dear Elise, we won't try to summarize the impact you've had on this place. There aren't enough pages. But we wanted you to know that your voice still echoes in these halls, still opens doors, still calms storms. Today, the board voted to approve the most comprehensive equity and conduct policy in company history. Your blueprint became the foundation, and we didn't erase your name from it. We printed it on the first page. We also enclosed something else, a small token. It's not a goodbye, just a recognition, because you didn't just walk through fire, you carried others through it. With deep respect, Nathaniel Carrington and the board." Elise unfolded the second paper tucked behind the letter. It was a printed policy document. Carrington Code of Ethics and Safety, Revised Charter, 2026. And at the bottom, in elegant serif font, "Inspired by the resilience and leadership of Elise M. Thompson." A soft gasp left her lips. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled slightly. She'd given everything, her energy, her truth, her silence, her safety. And now, something remained. Something that wouldn't vanish the moment she stepped away. That afternoon, Elise walked to the park near the old bookstore she used to visit as a child. The benches were wet from the morning rain, but she sat anyway, the sun just starting to break through gray clouds. She pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd carried since the snowstorm. On the last page, she wrote, "Legacy isn't what we leave behind, it's who we lift up while we're still here." Below it, she added, "I don't need statues. I need stories. And this is one of them. It's Dodd." The next week, Elise visited a small church community in the Bronx. She had been invited by a young organizer who heard about her through the listening room networks. They were planning to build a resource center, part daycare, part counseling clinic, part career mentorship hub. The idea was messy. The plan was raw. But the hope was real. Elise stood in the middle of the empty sanctuary, sunlight pouring through stained glass. The organizer, a girl no older than 22, looked to her like a nervous student awaiting judgment. "What do you think?" she asked. Elise smiled. "I think you're not asking for permission." "No," the girl said. "I'm asking for guidance." Elise nodded. "Then I'll stay a while." A month passed. Elise didn't return to Carrington. She didn't need to. The roots were planted. The building would stand or fall on its own now, and if it fell, someone else would rise and build something better. Instead, Elise focused on the world just outside her door. The broken stairwell light she helped fix. The teen boy on her block who loved poetry but never spoke it aloud. The single mother next door who shared a cup of sugar and a story in the same breath. This was justice too. Small, quiet, undocumented, but real. On a rainy Thursday, Elise visited her mother again. They sat in the living room, sharing cornbread and greens. "You look rested," her mother said. "Did they finally leave you alone?" Elise chuckled. "They did something better." "What's that?" They listened. Her mother nodded, took a bite, and said nothing more. But later, as they washed dishes side by side, her mother asked, "Do you think you'll go back?" Elise dried her hands slowly. "I think I'll keep going forward, wherever that leads." Her mother looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, she didn't see the daughter who had run from pain, or the girl who'd begged for a coat in the snow. She saw a woman who had made the world shift, one voice at a time. That night, Elise wrote one last name in her notebook under the list titled, People I Believe In. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled as she wrote, Elise M. Thompson again. 3 years later, on a quiet December morning, Elise stood once more at the corner of West 137th Street, just a block from where her life had almost disappeared into the snow. The sky was soft and gray, and a hush had fallen over the neighborhood. Snow hadn't begun to fall yet, but the air had that sharp, clean edge that said it was coming. In her arms, she held a box. Inside it, 6 new wool coats, 3 handmade blankets, and 1 pair of toddler mittens that she'd knitted herself. The label on the box read, The Listening Project, Winter Drop No. 47. It wasn't a charity. It was a promise. Every winter, Elise retraced part of the journey that had nearly undone her and planted something there instead. Warmth, witness, dignity, sometimes a coat, sometimes a story, always connection. Today, she was headed to a women's shelter that had just reopened in the old church building on Malcolm X Boulevard. The same shelter that, once, had turned her away. She didn't hold a grudge. She held coats. That was enough. Inside the shelter, volunteers bustled, quietly, serving food, organizing supplies, handing out hygiene kits. In the corner, a girl no older than 19 sat cradling a baby against her chest. She looked pale, tired. Her coat was threadbare. The child had none. Elise knelt beside her and opened the box. Would this help? She asked gently. The girl blinked at her, unsure whether to accept. Elise held out the smallest coat. This one, she said, was sewn by a woman in Brooklyn. Said her baby didn't make it, but she wanted another baby to stay warm. The girl touched the fabric, then nodded, lips trembling. Elise handed it over and watched the baby curl into it like it was safety itself. The girl whispered, Thank you. Elise didn't say you're welcome. She only smiled, because she knew what it meant to be seen. Later that night, she sat at a small table in her Harlem apartment, sipping black tea, the snow finally beginning to fall beyond the window. Her notebook sat open beside her, the pages now dog-eared, water-stained, filled to the very end. Every name, every story, every scar, and just before midnight, she added one more entry at the very bottom of the last page. The man in the snow, she wrote. He was never just a man, he was the test, the beginning, the mirror, and in giving him warmth, I found my own voice. And that voice, in time, gave warmth to the world. The next morning, Elise walked through the streets of New York as they slowly came back to life. Shopkeepers shoveling sidewalks, kids throwing snowballs, commuters tugging scarves higher around their faces. She passed a mural on a brick wall she hadn't noticed before. It showed a black woman in a heavy coat, kneeling to cover a child with a blanket, her eyes calm, defiant, full of grace. Below it, a single line. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it wraps you in warmth and waits. Elise stopped. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was recognition. She touched the mural gently, then turned back into the crowd. Not a statue, not a savior, just a woman who had stayed, and listened, and given away her only coat in the snow, never knowing the world she would change because of it. The story of Elise Thompson teaches us that real change doesn't begin in boardrooms or headlines. It begins in quiet acts of courage. By offering her only coat to a stranger in need, Elise set into motion a journey of justice, empathy, and transformation. Her story reminds us that integrity isn't loud, and leadership isn't always found at the top. Sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that simply refuse to stay silent. In a world that often values comfort over truth, Elise chose compassion, and in doing so, lit the way for others to be seen, heard, and believed.